World-class first-rate soloists here. This is Mark Ross of the alto soprano. Mark Ross of the alto saxophone. We have another jazz messenger in the house. This is the great Philip Harper at the trumpet. Philip Harper. We'd like to stay in that serious vein, and as you might know, and if you don't, that's okay. I always cite the story about 30 years ago. We played here, and somebody came to the stations and they asked, "Where's Mingus?" It's okay not to know, really. But in case you don't know, he was probably the most important American composer of the 20th century, and the first African-American composer whose entire body of 279 pieces were purchased by the Library of Congress of the United States, and we sincerely hope it stays there now. Hey, with this guy, you never know. So Charles Mingus passed away at 56 in 1979. His wife, Sue, continued to tour the band, which was called Mingus Dynasty back then. Mingus always wanted a large group, so in 91 she created this band. And we keep touring around the world playing. Our repertoire is about 150 out of 279 that he wrote. We would like to play an extended composition, of which Mingus was a true pioneer, merging classical forms with the jazz sound. And this one is called Meditations for a Pair of Wire Cutters. As a matter of fact, this is very serious because it comes out of a series of conversations with Eric Dolphy, and they were discussing the fact that ethnically Japanese with American passports were interned during World War II in Colorado and California, as you might know. So this is called Meditations for a Pair of Wire Cutters.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, yeah. So, we're going to go up to solo first, then all the way up until Q, and then back all the way to M for the next. That's right. So we go in like usual, and then go all the way back.
The arrangement.
Y'all got that?
You better not get around that.
Before I forget, I want to mention a few things. We would like to thank you all for coming, the club for inviting us back first time since 2018 we were here last time. Yeah. And thank you for coming out. We're always selling out. We're really happy about it. We do have our Grammy-winning recording available somewhere, and we have some individual band members recording. Who brought recordings? Who brought recordings? Okay. Well, please, they all very good. Please check them all out. I have a recording where I play solo on Charles Mingus's bass for 52 minutes. And I tell you, if you buy the big band and that one, I'll give you a third one, yet different one for free. So, just a little push. We would like to thank Albert San, our manager. Without him, we would not be here. And last but not least, this bass is, I always brag about having played like all the time basses. This is just as good, if not better, made by the guy in London whose name is Lauren Dixon. 2012, he brought it here. We were the first band to use it. And now it stays here at the club, so anytime you come here and you see a guest artist coming from outside London, you'll hear this bass. Yep. We now going back to 1939, when Mingus lived in California. He was very, very young, writing swing songs for dances, called himself Baron Mingus. Count Basie to Connington. So this is called This Subdues My Passion. extremely high notes played by the great Conrad Hurley of the New Trombone. Conrad Hurley. You know, we're not a wedding band, so we usually don't take requests, but somebody came, you know, if somebody is really, really into Mingus music and they come and they ask, please, can you play this? And I say, well, we have a road book, which is a third of what we usually have back home, because we have to carry this stuff. It happened to be in the book, and we haven't played it maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. So, good, yep, perfect time to do it. This is called Ecclesiastics, and originally was written for Rassan Roland Kirk, who played 2 saxophones at the same time. So this arrangement follows that idea, and it features 2 guys, and we need 2 volunteers, you and you. Okay. Okay, Doctor? I know you will. Our lead trumpeter is the doctor of music, Dr. Alexander Pope Norris. He never played this song before, and I just asked him if he needs a chart, and says, no, I'll hear it. And I know he will. And maybe my co-leader, Wayne Scotfrey, can you please play? Now comes the important part. You have to remember, we don't rehearse. We have 150 pieces in the book, and we want to play them all. So this part, Mingus called workshop. He would sell tickets, invite people to the gig, and rehearse in front of the audience. And you know, it was very interesting to see, but if you didn't like it, you couldn't get your money back. So this is the workshop part of it. You want to be first? I was going first at 25, and it's going to be open whenever the background comes. That's last time. Till 37. 25 through 37 is the first solo. 37 through 49 is the second solo. Same thing as when the background comes. That's it. Then we go to 49 when you'll converse over the vamp. The first ending doesn't exist. We cue the second ending. 65 out as is. You got it?
best to bring you the finest musicians, not only from New York, but in the world. So we have to make sure that they feel appreciated. So do me a favor and keep those hands going for Lauren Sevian on the baritone saxophone. Abraham Burton on the tenor saxophone. Playing flute, soprano, and alto saxophone, the one and only Mark Royce. The Frenchman himself, Mr. Alex Terrier on the alto saxophone. The jazz messenger, Robin Eubanks on the trombone. The amazing Conrad Herwig on the trombone. The Mingus alumnus among us, the only man who actually played with Charles Mingus on the stage, playing bass trombone and tuba, that's Earl McIntyre. Jazz messenger and the soul of the band, that's Philip Harper. Playing the wonderful solo trumpet, that's Alex Sipiagin on the trumpet. My man playing lead and solo trumpet, the one and only good Dr. Alexander Hope. And I'm sure you can hear it and feel it, as we certainly can. This amazing rhythm section of Helen Sung on the piano. Donald Edwards on drums and cymbals. Our musical director playing this wonderful British bass. Boris Kozlov on the bass. Into this yummy food. We have 9 more sets this week, I believe, so we have to, maintain our strength. Thank you for being here. Pick up some of the recordings that are up front. Hopefully we'll see you another time. Thank you. We are the biggest big band. My name is Wayne S. Scott.
Mingus Big Band, ladies and gentlemen. Keep it going, there goes. There's a lot of them to clear off stage. Mingus Big Band. ladies and gentlemen, that is all the live music we have time for this evening. We do have another show tonight. Unfortunately, it is sold out, so you are out of luck. We hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much for coming. Good night.
That is unbelievable. He hardly even looked at his music. He just played all the changes. Just unbelievable. Yeah, wow. I mean, it's just unbelievable. That was just unbelievable. I mean, this like is so complex, but at the same time, most of it was improvised. So it had a framework, but then it was improvised. Unbelievable. Yeah. Oh, just, yeah, they are jazz gods.
There's nothing, I mean, it's improvisation, but they're playing the music of